Among all the crazy things that Donald Trump says, apparently recently he attacked, or not necessarily attacked, but made a comment about veterans who have PTSD that raised a few red flags among soldiers and his critics. Now, he was speaking at the Retired American Warriors PAC, and he was specifically discussing the mental health care of our veterans. And he was asked a question about PTSD, and here's what he had to say about it.
When you talk about the mental health problems, when people come back from war and combat and they see things that maybe a lot of the folks in this room have seen many times over, and you're strong and you can handle it, but a lot of people can't handle it.
Okay, so that was the comment that made a lot of people upset because they felt like his language was making it seem as though people who suffer from PTSD after they do numerous tours in Afghanistan or Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries, if they suffer from PTSD, well, they're weak, they can't handle it, and it seemed like he was saying disparaging things about our soldiers. Now, of course, a lot of people were upset, including Joe Biden, who responded to it. Take a look.
He said, and I quote, "When you talk about mental health problems, when people come back from war and combat, they see things that maybe a lot of folks in this room have seen many times over." And then he points out to the veterans in the room and says, "And you're strong, you can handle it, but a lot of people can't handle it." Where in the hell is he from? I found myself in Iraq being asked by General Ordiano, a 4-star, to pin a silver medal on a young captain who had pulled someone out of a burning Humvee, risking his life. And when I went to pin it on him in front of the entire brigade, he stood at me, looked at me, and said, "Sir, I don't want the medal. I don't want the medal." You know why? He said, "He died. He died, Mr. Vice President. I don't want the medal." How many nights does that kid go to sleep? Seeing that image in his head, dealing with it. 52,419 wounded. But as the veteran can tell you, over 200,000 coming home with unseen wounds. 20 suicides a month. I don't think he was trying to be mean. He is just so thoroughly, completely uninformed.
I think that last statement was the most important part of what Biden had to say, because I think that in a lot of the negative things that Donald Trump says, there is ill intent. But in what he said, recently regarding PTSD, I don't think that there was ill intent there. I just think that there was a level of ignorance and a level of him being misinformed that led him to speak about PTSD in a way that's damaging to our soldiers, to our veterans, and to Americans who suffer from similar mental health problems. Look, people who suffer from mental health problems are already afraid of being stigmatized, and they don't want to come forward and seek the treatment and the health care that they need. And in this case, when you talk about them as being weak, as people who can't handle it, and you're talking about soldiers who are supposed to be identified as strong and brave, well, then it's going to deter them from getting the help that they need, you know?
So you nailed it there. In this Biden versus Trump, Biden clearly wins. It's a great moment for him. That's what he's really good at. But it really is the essence of both Biden and Trump. So Biden, at one point during that speech, they start to boo Trump. And he does the classic Biden. No. This is deadly earnest. Okay, I love when he calms the crowd down. He gets them riled up, then he calms them down like, no, wait a minute. This is not politics. This is really important stuff. It's a little politics. Okay, so, but he's obviously very emotional about this. His son's a veteran. His son passed away, not in war. Okay, got cancer later. But he talked to veterans groups, one of the best speeches I've ever seen. Before his son even passed away, talking about his loss of his daughter and his first wife in a car accident. So he's talking to those veterans' families who passed away, saying, "I know how that is." In his speech at the DNC, Biden said, I'm now stronger in broken places." Oof, powerful stuff, right? Now, on the other hand, you have Trump, who's a blithering idiot. So I'm with Anna on this one. I don't think he meant to insult veterans.
Yeah.
He's at a veterans group. The guy who said the comment says, no, you guys are, the media's twisting it in the wrong way. Obviously, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn is a Trump surrogate, so of course he's going to say that people are twisting it in the wrong way. But I really don't think that a lot of people are saying, no, Trump hates veterans. Although most of the veterans groups are saying, hey, just be a little careful with your language, you schmuck.
Exactly.
It's sickening to insinuate that veterans who have PTSD are weak, right? But he doesn't know what he's doing. He's so inept.
He's not tactful in any way.
Yeah, and in another part of that statement that got him in trouble there, he said, so we're going to have a very, very robust level of performance having to do with mental health. He repeated it, not me. 4 veries. He puts 4 veries in a sentence because he doesn't know how to speak like an adult.
No.
And normally that's cute and ha-ha, we make fun of him and stuff. But it's not cute when you accidentally insinuate that veterans who maybe had an IED explode under their Humvee, et cetera, all these different things that they went through that you never went through, for you to insinuate that they're weak, see, that contributes to the problem. Even if you don't mean it, it perpetuates the situation where they don't go to get help. And then we have about 20 suicides a day from veterans.
Yep.
So that's why you accidentally, through your ineptitude, contribute to the problem, which is the essence of Donald Trump.
And what's also interesting is his inability to see the irony in what he says, because you're talking about certain individuals who can't handle these situations, but you're the same presidential candidate who got 4 deferments in the Vietnam War.
No, right? Anna, let me correct you. 5. The 5th one's the most important. So another part of what he said to the veterans that day is he said they see events that you couldn't see in a movie. Now, the reason he frames it that way is because the only time he's ever been close to battle is when he's in a movie theater for Donald Trump. He had a chance to go to Vietnam. He got the 4 deferments while he was in school. Now, a lot of people got deferments when they were in school. Hard to tell why. They might have gone to school anyway, right? And likely Donald Trump would have gone to school. I'm going to totally pardon that, okay? The 5th deferment, he's out of pen. I talked about this extensively last night on Loser Donald, okay? And at that point, the draft lottery has not begun. He says it did, and he got a phenomenal number. Okay, all right, I don't even want to talk about what a phenomenal number means in the draft lottery. Okay, phenomenal. Other people got to die for me. It was phenomenal. Okay, but no, it's not even true. It's a total lie. He got a medical deferment before the lottery even began about bone spurs in his heel.
Yeah.
And then when asked about it when running for president, he's like, oh, I don't know which heel.
Yep.
Ah! Of course he made it up. Of course he made it up. He ran from Vietnam, and I know a lot of people did. I get it, and it was a terrible war. We shouldn't have done it in the first place. But he ran from Vietnam. Then he talks about how I can relate to veterans. It's like they go through violence even worse than movies. Even worse than movies. Now, some of them are strong, can handle it. Others are not. Don't talk about whether veterans are strong or not.
Yep.
Shush, shush.
Another final thing I want to say, and again, intent does matter, and I don't think he intended to insult veterans, but he did insult veterans. And so, you know, there is a large number of people that support Donald Trump who are furious with Kaepernick for refusing to stand for the national anthem. And they're angry with him because they feel like Kaepernick is insulting the troops. But no, he's not insulting the troops. He's trying to raise awareness about a real problem in the United States that needs to be solved, whereas Donald Trump just insulted troops because he doesn't know how to speak properly. He can't help himself from insulting them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really going to be that offended by Kaepernick, how do you not get offended by Trump, let alone this comment? Remember the famous comment where he said about John McCain, I prefer people who weren't captured.
That's right.
That is 1,000 times more insulting to veterans than Colin Kaepernick sitting during the national anthem or Star Spangled Banner because of police brutality having nothing to do with veterans at all. Come on. Look, you just don't pretend you're angry at Kaepernick because of veterans. That's a total lie. You're angry at him over political differences. But at the same time, you'll make any and all excuses for your favorite orange monkey, Donald Trump. Together we can change the media, make it more representative of you and not the powerful. Come join us, make a difference. TYTnetwork.com/join.